Hello and a very good afternoon to everybody. Apologies for being a little bit late to today's webinar. We had a couple of technical issues, and if I look like I have got a big light on me, that is because I have. We've had to do a little bit of a jig around today to make sure that the lighting is right, because of course we are now into the darker afternoons, and for some reason our system is just not playing game with us today. So if you think I'm looking very pale and very bright in some places, you wouldn't be wrong in thinking that. So I do apologise for the delay and for the presentation. But there we go. We are here back. It's Friday, the 20th of November already, and we are back for another Friday afternoon furlough webinar. And I'm going to take you through some key changes that have happened as a result of the extended furlough scheme. And I'm also just going to touch base a little bit on the Kickstart scheme. So for those of you who are familiar with what this is all about, this is HR for UK, and we are a leading HR my teeth in. You can see I haven't done this for a while. HR for UK is a leading provider for HR and employment law support. We also provide support to businesses in relation to payroll and pensions, and also health and safety. We've got over 30 years experience, and we've got some brilliant 5-star reviews on our website. And I would strongly encourage you to go onto our website and have a look for yourself to see what other people say about our services. And I have to say, I'm incredibly proud with those 5-star reviews, because I mean it really from my heart, because there is no greater pleasure than for us to be able to help businesses manage their staff and keep them on the right side of the law. So many of you might be wondering, who am I? I'm Angela Clay, and as an HR and employment law solicitor and the managing director of HR for UK, I'm responsible for HR for UK's role in leading your business out of this pandemic crisis by providing you with clear, professional advice and providing you with our HR services. I've always said this right from when the crisis started, which now almost feels like a lifetime ago already, and something that we've got to live with. But my vision is to make sure that your business comes out of this pandemic crisis successfully by offering you clear, professional and practical advice and support. And today's webinar is not going to disappoint, because we've got some top tips for you and some key dates that you need to be aware of in relation to the extended furlough scheme. So let's have a quick look at what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at how to use the furlough scheme. Now, it is an extension of the original scheme, but there are some slightly different rules that will apply, and I'm going to tell you what those rules are and how you can apply it to using the scheme. Also about keeping up to date with the latest government guidance, and of course, highlighting those important dates that I mentioned a moment ago, and just looking at the Kickstart scheme on how you can make it work for you, and how you can take advantage of the government funding that is available, and more importantly, how HR for UK can help you to deliver on that Kickstart scheme. So one of the things that I know is cropping up quite a lot in terms of where we are at the moment in the UK, in England. Of course, we're in the national lockdown. Various other devolved governments have come out or are going into various stages of lockdown. But what I want to make sure is that you know exactly what you need to do for your business should the unfortunate incident happen where there is a coronavirus outbreak in your workplace. And that is going to be the topic of my workshop and my webinar in December. So don't go away too far, because I've seen too many businesses get caught short, and I want to make sure that you are well prepared if you find yourself in that situation. So as always, we have the questions. We have the panel on the right hand side. Please do ask those questions. Those questions are very important, not only to you, but if you are thinking of a question and you don't have the answer, the likelihood that there's somebody else in the room who has that same burning question will probably want to ask the same thing. So please don't be afraid to ask those questions. Pop them in the question box, and I will have a look at those during the course of the webinar, and of course definitely at end point when we get to our Q&As. So do do ask those questions, and it doesn't have to just be about today's webinar. It can be about any employment law matter. And of course, we do have our HR surgeries that we have introduced, and I will tell you a little bit more about those at the end of today's webinar. So don't forget those questions, they're all important, and don't forget that if you do need to leave because I waffle on for too long, this webinar is being recorded, and you will get a recording of it in your inbox next week. And of course, you can go back and have a look at all our other previous webinars that we've had, and they are an invaluable resource. So please do go back to them and revisit what we have talked about before. But that's enough for that. Let's have a look at what we're going to be covering today. So we now know that the flexible furlough scheme, the furlough scheme, the various sort of names that it has had, the coronavirus job retention scheme has been extended. Now, this was against everything that was being publicised before, but now the government was forced to make a U-turn, and we now have the Coronavirus Act 2020, Functions of Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme Direction. So that really is a mouthful, and that was issued by the Treasury on the 13th of November. This is the fourth version of the Treasury Direction to be issued, and these are all looked at together as one direction, which forms a legal framework for the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme. So let's have a look at what the fourth Treasury Direction really means. It formally extends the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme from the 1st of November to the 31st of March 2021. It also sets out in detail how the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme will operate between the 1st of November and the 31st of January. It doesn't provide any details after the 31st of January because we are fully expecting a fifth version of these Treasury directions to be issued, and they will be published so they can cover the periods of February and March. And of course, the Treasury direction formally withdraws the Coronavirus Job Bonus Scheme. So if you remember, that was a scheme that you were going to be paid £1,000 for every successfully furloughed employee that's still on your payroll in March. That has now been withdrawn, and you will no longer be entitled to that. But the main focus of the 32-page document addresses how the scheme will operate until the 31st of January. And I'm going to look at that in quite a bit of detail in today's webinar. And the reason why it only goes up until the 31st of January is because the government is going to review the economic situation at that time to make a decision whether it is going to continue with the scheme offering that 80% of wages, or whether it is going to adopt a similar approach to what it did with the original scheme, where it started to introduce a phased introduction where the employer's contributions started to increase. And that would really be for February and March. I know at the moment, and I wish I had a crystal ball, but at the moment there is no indication that the scheme will be extended beyond March 2021. But of course, I know you will all be sitting there and you will all be thinking, we've heard that before. So we will watch this space and we will see what happens. So as I've already said, the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme has been extended, and the government has issued guidances to that. And there are there are actually 13 sets of guidance that refer to the Coronavirus Job Support Retention Scheme, but there are two really important ones that is important for businesses, and the others are really supporting guidances. But the two main ones are to check whether employees can be put on furlough, and to check if you can claim your employees' wages. So those are the two guidances that are probably the most important. But as I've already said, there are actually 13 different sets which together provides the guidance, and together that is what the Treasury Direction comes out of. But again, in true fashion, within 48 hours of the guidance being published, there were amendments, and there have been more amendments since then, And I have to confess, it did feel like we were going back to the furlough roller coaster ride we were all on back in March. And I thought, here we go, let's hang on tight and let's hold tight onto those seats. But thankfully, the changes that have come through have been more of a clarification and sorting out a couple of oversights that the government had seen when they had issued these guidances. And thankfully, it wasn't a change in direction as it was back in March. So the rules cover a wide range of issues, including eligibility, furlough agreements, claim periods, references to salaries and pay, calculating what those usual hours of work are, looking at permitted activities during furlough, also including a section in terms of business succession. So this includes situations where there has been a transfer of a business, where the 2P regulations apply, or where an organisation has carried out a PAYE reorganisation. So there's a brand new PAYE, and the new directions actually cover those, which is really positive news for businesses who have gone through that. We will also have a look at the time limits for making claims, because that has changed quite significantly. And of course, a big surprise to many people was HMRC is going to be publicising the claims. So businesses who do make use of the extended scheme, their details are going to be published. So quite a lot to cover today, so let's get started and let's crack on. So let's have a look at how to use the extended furlough scheme. So you can use the extended furlough scheme if you cannot maintain your workforce because your operations are affected by coronavirus. And you can furlough your employees and apply for a grant to cover those wages. And it's only a proportion of their wages, and it is where you are going to be claiming for the period of time where they are not in work. So it's those furloughed hours. If you are having an employee who is fully furloughed, it will be for the entire hours that they are not working. And of course, if you're using the flexi furlough, you as an employer will still need to continue to pay your employee for the hours that they work. So the coronavirus job retention scheme will remain open, as I've already said, until the 31st of March. But from the 1st of November, you can claim 80% of your employees' usual wages for the hours that are not worked, up to a maximum of £2,500 per month. As an employer, you will need to pay the employer national insurance contributions and, of course, the employer auto-enrollment contributions. The government will pick up everything else. And this takes us back to how we were in August under the original scheme. So it should sound a little bit familiar to you. You can claim for employees who were employed on the 30th of October, as long as you had made a PAYE payment and you had made a real-time information submission to HMRC between the 20th of March and the 30th of October, notifying HMRC that a payment in respect of earnings for that particular employee has been made. Now, this may differ if you have made employees redundant, or they stopped working for you on or after the 23rd of September, and you have subsequently re-employed those employees. So all employers with a UK bank account and a UK PAYE scheme can claim the grant. You do not have to have previously furloughed, you do not have to have previously made a claim through the furlough scheme before the 30th of October to be able to participate in this second phase of the scheme. You will be able to make claims whether you, regardless of whether you furloughed people or not. So employers can furlough employees for any amount of time and for any work pattern, and you will still be able to claim for the grant for those hours that are not worked. Employers can claim for periods ending on or before the 30th of October until the deadline, which is the 30th of November. So you've still got some time to put those claims in. If you do not get the claim in by the 30th of November, you would have forfeited your right to be able to make that claim. So if you've got any claims that are outstanding relating to the 31st of up to the 31st of October, please do make sure that you get those claims in by no later than the 30th of November. You might need to contribute towards the costs of your furloughed employees' wages for these periods. I'll cover those contributions that you may need to cover later on, and typically those will relate to notice pay or holiday pay. And again, notice pay is slightly different under the scheme to what it was on the original scheme. So for periods from the 1st of November, you will need to only pay for the employer contributions, employer national insurance contributions, and of course the pension costs. The government will pay 80% of those wages, and of course the employee will forego the 20%. Of course, if you are in a position where you can top up wages, that is entirely down to you, but you are not under any obligation to make that top up. HMRC will continue to have their BDI to monitor those claims, and payments will be withheld or will be required to be paid back if it is found that any claims have been fraudulently made, or if you have used incorrect data to make those claims. It's really, really important to make sure your data is correct. So let's have a quick look at eligibility. So we all know that employers with a UK bank account and a UK PAYE scheme can make a claim for a grant. And this includes any entity with a UK payroll. So this includes charities and public authorities, and of course the usual businesses, recruitment agencies, etc. Can use the scheme. As I've already mentioned, you do not have to have previously furloughed an employee before the 30th of October to be able to take advantage of the scheme from the 1st of November, which was a real sigh of relief when they extended the scheme, because you will recall that many people were left between a rock and a hard place because they missed the original deadline. So again, the scheme does cover those employees. So you can claim for an employee on any type of contract, employment contract. So this includes full-time employees, part-time employees, agencies, those who are on flexible hours, and also those who are on 0-hour contracts. Foreign nationals can also be eligible for furlough, and of course grants under the furlough scheme do not count as access to public funds. So if you are employing national foreign nationals, you can give them the comfort in knowing that they will be able to have access to this. And of course, you can furlough employees on all categories of visas, so there isn't any restriction on that. So if you're claiming for periods that end on or before the 31st of October, you can only claim if you have previously furloughed your employee for before the 1st of July. And you need to make sure that you have submitted a claim by the 31st of July. So this is the difference between the two schemes, is if you are still making a claim under the old scheme, you still had a deadline of the 1st of July to have previously furloughed an employee. But of course, from the 1st of November, there is no requirement to have previously furloughed an employee. Of course, this may differ if you have an employee that is returning from any statutory parental leave. If you are claiming for an employee for a claim period that starts on or after the 1st of November, you can claim for that furloughed employee, and you can claim for that furlough employee as long as they were on your payroll and they were employed on the 30th of October. And what that really means from a practical point of view is that you must have made a PAYE RTR submission to HMRC between the 20th of March and the 30th of October, notifying HMRC that payments of earnings in respect of a particular employee has been made. I know it gets all very confusing, so it is really important just to, in your mind, make sure that you know the difference between whether you are operating on the original scheme or the extended scheme. But hopefully that will come to an end, because of course the original scheme is now closed, and you will only be able to make claims for the period up until the 31st of October by the 30th of November. So where you have made, the rules might differ slightly, of course, where you have made employees redundant or they have stopped working for you on or after the 23rd of September, and you have rehired them. In other words, you have re-engaged them and brought them back into your employment. You can still make a claim even if you are receiving public funding, but of course the claim for the grant that you can make is only in relation to private funding that you may have. So if your organisation is 100% publicly funded, you need to use that public funding to pay wages and you cannot use the scheme. But of course, if you are partially public funded and partially privately funded, you can use the scheme to claim the privately funded element of your employee's wage. So let's have a look at furlough agreements. Now, I know I sound like a stuck record, and I was very clear throughout my webinars about having that written agreement. But the latest guidance, and certainly the Treasury direction, has made it crystal clear that you need to have an agreement, and that agreement needs to be kept for 5 years. So let's have a look at how that agreement will come into play. So employers should discuss with your staff any changes that you are going to be making to their employment contract, and you must do that by agreement. So when you are making decisions about furloughing staff, you must always bear in mind equality and discrimination law, because that will still apply and it can still come back and bite you on the bum if you do not operate in a fair and equitable way. So do make sure that you are fully aware of equality and of course those discrimination rules. So once you've made a decision as to who you are going to furlough, you must make sure that you confirm that furlough arrangement in writing, confirming that the employee has been furloughed, and you must keep that record for 5 years. You must also keep a record of how many hours your employee usually works and how many hours you have put your employee on those furlough hours. And those records, as I've already said, must be kept for 5 years. HR for UK have, of course, provided a detailed template that you can use for the agreement, and if you need to get one or you need to use one, I would strongly recommend that you get in contact with us. You can get in contact with us through our website, which is www.hrforuk.com, or you can give us a call on 01455 222 444 or you can drop us an email at info@hrforuk.com. And all you need to say is, following the webinar following Angela's webinar, you will be able to, you are requesting for those templates and we will email it to you. So the employee does not need to provide a written response. The obligation is for you to provide that written document to your employee. There is no requirement for the employee to sign it, return it, or even acknowledge it. Even though our agreements do have a signature place for the employee, of course, best practice is to have their signature on it, but there is no requirement for it. Another key thing that is really important is that furlough agreements must be in place before the employee starts their relevant period of furlough for which you are going to make that claim. So again, it's really important, get that agreement agreed up front and you can rely on it. What you can't do is retrospectively issue a furlough agreement. So it's really important to make sure that that is issued before the employee goes on furlough. It is sufficient to use an updated version of an earlier agreement. And when I talk about an updated version, I'm talking about our version of the furlough agreement, which was issued at the beginning of November. So there is a new furlough agreement, which we would strongly recommend that you use from the 1st of November, because it will provide much greater detail and it really is focused on this phase of the coronavirus job retention scheme. There was, of course, a small window of opportunity to retrospectively issue furlough agreements, but that has now passed. So if you haven't done it, you won't be able to claim for that period. But what I would strongly recommend is that you make sure that you issue those agreements before your employee goes on furlough. So, of course, you can full-time furlough employees, and when employees are under full-time furlough, they cannot undertake any work for you. And of course, we still have the flexi furlough scheme, where employees can work sometime for you, and sometimes they can be on furloughed hours. In other words, hours where they are not worked. Of course, as I've said before, if they are going to be working, you need to pay them the usual wage for that period. And of course, the furlough hours, they would get their furlough pay unless you are going to be topping up their wages. And of course, there's no requirement to place all your employees on furlough, but you can continue to fully furlough all your staff if you wish. It is really down to business needs and business requirements as to how you use the scheme. But again, as I've said, employees during furlough hours, they cannot carry out any work for you. There is no minimum furlough period. You will remember in the early days, there was a minimum furlough period of 3 weeks. That no longer exists. So you can be flexible on the amount of furlough hours. You know, you can put an employee on the furlough, flexible furlough agreement more than once. So they can cycle on and off of the furlough scheme. So although the furlough agreement can last any amount of time, in terms of a claim period, the claim period must be for a minimum of 7 calendar days. And I'll talk about more about the claim periods in a moment. And just like a segue, I come to my next heading, which of course is the claim periods. So as I've already just said, there is no minimum number of weeks or days that an employee must be on furlough. They can be on furlough for as little as 1 day or 1 hour. There really is not a requirement. However, any claim that you put through the portal must cover a period of at least 1 week. And if you're claiming for the first few days or the last few days, it will be slightly different, because of course any claims that are made must be made within the calendar month in which it falls. You can only claim for a period of fewer than 7 days if it includes the first and the last days of a calendar month, and you have already claimed for the same employee for a period immediately before it. So slightly different rules apply if that claim period falls at the beginning or at the end of the month. Claim periods must start and end within the same calendar month. So claim periods for November can only be for November, December, January, etc., etc. So let's have a look at the references to salaries, because there are some slight differences. The principle is the same, but there are different key dates on whether you are on the original scheme or whether you are on the new scheme. So the reference to salaries will depend whether the employee is eligible for furlough under the original scheme. So for employees who were eligible under the original scheme, regardless of whether you actually put them on furlough, because of course under this scheme you can furlough people even if they weren't previously furloughed, but if they were employed and were eligible under the original scheme, their calculation is based on the wages payable to your employee in their last pay period on or before the 19th of March 2020. When you are looking at pay reference salaries for employees who are only eligible under the new scheme, so this will cover employees who joined your employment after the previous cutoff, which was the 19th of March. The calculation that you are going to be using is their wages in their last pay period ending on or before the 30th of October 2020. Again, there's 2 different dates, and it will depend whether the employee started their employment with you after the 19th of March or whether their employment with you was before that period. So again, it's just deciding whether you are on whether your employee was eligible at the time of the original scheme or whether they were eligible at the time of the new scheme. Okay. So let's have a look at how we're going to calculate your wages and how that is going to work for fixed wages and how that's going to work for those who have variable pay. And it's going to sound like a common theme, because again, there are going to be different rules that are going to apply to different depending on whether your employee was eligible under the original scheme. So for employees who were eligible under the original scheme, regardless of whether they were furloughed or not, you must base their calculation on the higher of their wages earned in the corresponding calendar month in the tax period of 2019 to 2020, or the average wages payable in the tax year for 2019-2020. So this is in relation to employees who have got variable pay. You will need to cross-check and go back to see what they earned in the previous calendar year, the previous tax year. So for employees who are only eligible for the furlough scheme under the new scheme, in other words, those are new joiners who joined your organisation after the previous cut-off date, which was the 19th of March, you must base their calculation on the average payable earnings from the start date of their employment or the 6th of April, whichever is the later, and the day before the coronavirus job extension, the coronavirus job retention scheme extension furlough scheme kicked in, and both periods, both days are inclusive. I think that's a bit of a tongue tie, so I'll probably say it all again and probably get all tongue tied again. So just to recap again, for the benefit of those who got lost along the way, I think I got lost myself. So for employees who are only eligible on the new scheme, so those are for new joiners who joined your employment on or after the 19th of March, you must base their calculation on their average earnings between the start date of their employment or the 6th of April, whichever is the later, and the day before their coronavirus job retention extension furlough periods begin. And both the start date and the end date will be included in those average calculations. Hope everybody got that and it's clear. So let's have a look at the hours. So again, you need to start calculating the hours in relation to their usual working hours. So for those employees who are on fixed hours and don't have variable hours, it's fairly straightforward. And you will base your usual hours on your employee's contractual period for the relevant pay period. Now, again, we're going to have two differences. The usual hours are going to be calculated as at a particular point in time. So for employees who were eligible under the original scheme, whether or not they were actually placed on furlough, their hours are based on the pay period ending on or before the 19th of March. So whatever their contractual hours were on or before the 19th of March, that is the hours that you will use as their usual hours. So for employees who are only eligible under the new scheme, so those are for your new joiners who joined you after the previous cutoff, their usual hours will be their contractual hours as per the contract of employment on the last pay period ending on or before the 30th of October. So again, we've got those two differences between the different periods. I think I'm missing a page. No, I've already covered it. So again, I'm getting myself all tongue-tied here and tongue-twisted. So again, when we're looking at the working hours, again, we're going to use the average as we have done with their pay. So let's have a look at permitted activities during furlough. So when your employees are on furlough, in other words, the hours where they are not working for you and they are being paid only 80% of their wages, you cannot ask them to do any work for you. And what when we talk about doing any work, what we mean is that you cannot ask them to do anything that will make money, that will generate revenue for your organization or any organization linked or associated with your organization. And you cannot ask your employee to do any work that provides a service to your organization or any organization that is linked or associated with your organization. Your employee can, of course, undertake training for which they will get full pay. They can volunteer for another organisation, so they can do volunteer work, and actually they can work for another organisation and receive full pay for that other organisation. So again, those rules are similar, they are exactly the same under the old scheme as what they are under the new scheme. There's no changes there. So again, some new directions that were introduced in the Treasury directions and the 13 issues of different guidances that have come out, and that's relating to business succession. So over the last 6 to 8 months, a lot has happened with a lot of businesses. Some businesses have sold where the 2P regulations apply. For those of you who are not sure what the 2P regulations are, they are in relation to it's the protection of employment rights. So it relates to the transfer of employment protection regulations, employee protection regulations. So the employees are protected. And of course, there have been many organisations either under a 2P transfer or where they have consolidated because the organisation has to carry out a restructure and it is much smaller than the original organisation, and they have consolidated a number of payroll schemes. So eligible employees who should have been transferred from the old employer to the new employer after the 31st of August and have been employed by their old employer or their new employer on the 31st of October will be eligible to this, to participate in the scheme. Of course, there is that usual caveat that there must have been a PAYE real-time submission to HMRC, either by their new employer or by their old employer after the 21st of March and before the 31st of October, notifying HMRC that there has been that payment in respect of a particular employee. So I'm now going to cover two really key pieces that are new to the scheme. You will recall under the previous scheme, you could serve notice on an employee, you could use the furlough scheme to top up that notice period, and you had to just add in the remaining wages so that the employee received 100% of their wages. Under the new scheme, so from the 1st of December, any employee who is serving their notice, regardless of whether that notice has been served by them, so in other words, they have handed in their resignation, or whether you have served notice on them, whether it be for their statutory or their contractual notice pay, you will not be able to use the scheme to supplement that notice pay. So what this means for you is that you will have to fit the bill 100% for any notice pay. So you cannot use the scheme to claim the payment in relation to any notice period, regardless of whether that was from the employee or whether you served notice. Now, they have said that that is until the 31st of January, but of course we know that these directions only focus on the period between the 1st of November and the 31st of January. The notice is in particular is in relation from the 1st of December to the 31st of January. And I very much anticipate that this ban on making claims for notice during the periods of February and March will continue. And I think it's the government's way of trying to make businesses stop putting people on notice and using the scheme to make to fund that notice pay. And I really think it is an opportunity for businesses, to retain their staff. And I think this is the essence of why the government has implemented this, is to stop those mass redundancies and those mass people being out of employment. The other big thing that came as a little bit as a surprise and was quite alarming to a number of businesses is that now it is a condition that when you are making a claim, you as the employer accept that HMRC will be publishing your claim details on the internet. It will become publicly available for anybody to search and find out whether your organisation has made a claim. And this will include the name of the employer, a reasonable indication of the amount claimed. It won't be specific details, but it will give, I should imagine, rounded figures of how much has been claimed. And there is an expectation that if employers are afraid that having their details made public available will cause their workforce to be put in serious risk of violence or intimidation. So this is where you may find that you will have organisations, and of course I know we've brushed with such organisations ourselves when we touched on a very sensitive topic earlier on in the year, where they may become quite intimidating. And if you feel that if you are genuinely needing to make a claim and you don't want to have your company's details publicised, you do need to get in contact with HMRC, and you need to explain why you believe that why having your name publicly put out in the public domain and how much you claim is going to put your employees at risk. You would need to provide clear evidence, of course, that is genuine. And this is another part on HMRC's efforts, I'm trying to find my words here, efforts to retain their commitment on transparency and to really deter those fraudulent claims. Of course, businesses who genuinely need to make these claims, that is what it is there for. The scheme is there to help and support you, but what we are looking at for is for businesses who are abusing the scheme, and it is to deter those claims. So claims made in November, you're okay, but of course any claims made on or after the 1st of December, as I say, the information will be published on the government website, and that will include the employer name, an indication of the value of the claim that has been made, and of course the company or charity, sorry, not charity, the company registration number. So again, people will be able to check out on the company's house. As I said, HMRC will not publish these details if you have notified them and provided them with evidence that you feel that such publishing of the information will result in serious risk of violence or intimidation. So you must tell HMRC as soon as possible if that is going to be the case. So again, so that's looking at the directions. I think I've covered very much everything there, but just a quick reminder that employee rights still continue during the furlough period. Employees still have the same rights at work, and that includes statutory sick pay, annual leave, maternity and other parental rights. They of course have the right against unfair dismissal and redundancy payments. Grant can't be used to substitute the redundancy payments, and of course that is the statutory redundancy payment that we are talking about. Holiday pay is exactly the same as what it was under the original scheme. Employees who are on furlough continue to accrue annual leave as per their terms of employment. Of course, an employer and an employee can vary those holiday entitlements if you provide enhanced holiday. But of course, workers are entitled to a minimum of 5.6 weeks statutory paid holiday, and you cannot go below that. Of course, you will remember that the government extended the scheme to be able to carry over holiday for the next 2 years, but of course that is a liability for employers. So our key message to you is to make sure that you manage that and get your employees to take their holiday while they are on furlough. And of course you will need to top up their pay to that 100%. You will be able to claim for that furlough period for the holiday pay, so those hours that they are on furlough and holiday, but you will need to top up their pay for the extra 20% to make sure that the employee receives their normal holiday pay for that period. So again, nothing has changed there in terms of holiday pay. So the next part of today's webinar, and I'm really conscious that the time just disappears. Where does it go to? But some really, really key and very, very important dates that I want to share with you. Don't worry, I am going to send this out in an email communication to you, so you don't need to get that pen to scribble down. But listen up, this is really, really important. So the time limits for furlough claims has changed. You probably know by now that there are some new, very tight time scales within which you can make your claim with HMRC. Broadly speaking, the claims must be submitted within 2 weeks at the end of the previous calendar month, unless there is a reasonable excuse for you not to have done that. The government has now amended their guidance to give examples of what reasonable excuses could be, because of course a reasonable excuse could be anything, but they have now come out and they're quite clear what those reasonable excuses are. But top point, these deadlines, okay, so the first deadline that is fast looming is the 30th of November. The 30th of November is the last date on which employers can claim or change their claims for the claim period ending on or before the 31st of October. So for anything for claims up until the end of 31st of October, those claims must be put in by the 30th of November, which is only 10 days away. So, make sure that you get those claims in. In terms of, so from the 1st of November, the claims must be made as follows. So if you think of the claim days in November, so from the 1st of November to the 30th of November, you must put in your claim on or before the 14th of December. Any claims made from the 1st of December to the 31st of December, you must make your claim, of course, through the portal by no later than the 14th of January 2021. For any furlough hours or days in January, so the 1st of January to the 31st of January, you must submit your claim through the portal by no later than the 15th of February 2021. For any furlough claim periods in February, so from the 1st of February to the 28th of February, because of course we don't have a leap year this year, so it's the 28th of February, you must put your claim in on or before the 15th of March 2021 using the government portal to make that claim. And the final claim, as we know it at the moment, for any furlough days during the period of March, so that is from the 1st of March to the 31st of March, must be made on or before the 14th of April. So let's have a quick look at what those examples are of what reasonable excuse may be for missing the deadline. They are quite specific, so please be aware. So examples are your partner or another close relative has died shortly before the claim deadline. You had an unexpected stay in hospital that prevented you from dealing with your claim. You had a serious or life-threatening illness, including coronavirus-related illnesses, which prevented you from making your claim, and no one else could make that claim on your behalf. You were in a period of self-isolation, which prevented you from making your claim, and no one else could make that claim for you on your behalf. Your computer failed or the software failed while or just before you were preparing to make your online claim, and the issues are with the HMRC online services prevented you from making your claim. I think that's quite a common problem that many people have, and just to prove it, we had it today when we tried to get onto this webinar. So again, that could be a reasonable excuse. Of course, another reasonable excuse is there's a fire, a flood, or there has been a theft that has prevented you from making your claim. Postal delays that you could not have predicted would have prevented you from making your claim. But of course, don't forget that all claims are made online. So again, I think if you're going to be relying on the postal reasonable excuse, I think you would need to have a very good reason why you're relying on post. And the delays, another reasonable excuse is the delays related to a disability that prevented you from making your claim. And finally, that there was an HMRC error that prevented you from making your claim. And there's been a common term or phrase there which has prevented you from doing it. So I think you need to be able to show that you have made all reasonable efforts to be able to make that claim rather than just leaving it to the last minute. So I think I've covered everything in terms of, the extension furlough scheme. Lots of information in there. If anybody has any questions or queries, I know there have been questions that have been popping up in the question box, and I will have a look at those at the moment. But I just want to spend these last few minutes just really having a look at the Kickstart scheme. And we know that the Kickstart scheme has already started. And really, for those of you who are not familiar with it, what the Kickstart scheme is, it was a scheme that the government introduced to fund the creation of high-quality jobs for young people who are at the risk of being in long-term unemployment. It's an opportunity to give young people the chance to build their confidence and work skills in the workplace, and to gain some experience which will improve their chances of going on to getting long-term and suitable employment. So essentially what the government really wants is employers to create a 6-month work placement for young people between the ages of 16 and 24, and the government is going to pay directly to employers the national minimum wage, national insurance contributions and pension contributions based on a minimum of 25 hours per week. So that is a real opportunity for businesses to support the young workers, but it's also an opportunity for businesses to get that help and support in their organisations, and of course to have it funded by the government. So the government is encouraging all businesses to apply and to take on a young person. But for small businesses, it could be a little bit of a tricky issue, because you will need to use a gateway, a Kickstart gateway, to apply. Unless, of course, you're going to be having a minimum of 30 placements, in which case you can apply directly. But if you only have 1 or 2 placements, you do need to find yourself a Kickstart gateway. And of course, HR for UK, we are a recognised gateway, so we can help you and support you with your Kickstart. So all you need to do is come to us and we will help you with that application. But we have found that one of the things that small businesses, and I've certainly had feedback on this, not only in terms of organisations trying to test the market, but where small businesses find that they are going to struggle, and that is providing the training for those young workers. And again, HR for UK have got a brilliant scheme available for you, and we will be able to support you with that training. So please don't be put off thinking, oh, I'm not going to be able to deliver the training element of it. We will work very, very closely with you to be able to deliver a comprehensive range of training, so that your young worker, once they have finished their placement with you, will be well placed to be able to apply for work outside of the Kickstart scheme. So there is no requirement for you to employ the young worker after the 6-month placement has come to an end. Of course, if they've really made a good impression on you and you want to keep them, you are of course welcome to offer them a permanent role, but of course you are not under any obligation to do that. As I said, the main aim of these placements is to give young people skills to make them fundamentally more employable in the long term. And whilst the government has made it quite clear the types of things that they want to see in those training modules, it is actually getting quite extensive. And I actually spoke to an organisation yesterday who are putting on these training modules for people. But of course, as I say, HR for UK, we're well ahead and we can do much better than what they are doing. And of course, I am biased because I think that the offering that we have is really comprehensive and not something that you will get elsewhere. So enough about what HR for UK can provide you. What employers have to do, there is no formal documentation at the moment as to what is required on what this Kickstart placement is going to be, other than that it's not meant for free labour. It's got to be meaningful work, and of course the candidate needs to come out at the end of it having learned some good skills. So once you've gone through the Kickstart and you have the candidates, you can go through your own application process and you can apply and implement your usual hiring criteria. So it's not a case of you're simply just given someone, you do still have the final say as to who you are going to be having in your organization. So you do have the final say, and you can pick the best suitable candidate for the job that you have available to them. Of course, as with any job, it may not work out, and it is a fair assumption to say that you will be able to terminate that placement without any major repercussions. But of course, HR for UK will be here to help you and guide you through that if you do need to go through that process. So I've talked about the training. There is funding to the tune of £1,500 to support the training. It is to provide a positive experience for both the employer and the employee. And of course, that funding is intended for the training. And if you need to buy specific equipment for that particular individual, maybe you've got a work uniform, or you maybe need to buy another laptop, for example, that is what that funding is for. And as I've already said, research has shown and will be published that businesses are ill prepared to provide the support in terms of training that small businesses will be needing to give to their placements. But as I say, HR for UK is delighted to be able to say that we can provide that support in training packages that can cost you anything from £350 to £1,000 per participant. This is paid through the training element of government funding, and of course the training will be based on, will be provided throughout that 6-month period. So just a quick look at what that training will look like. So what will your £1,000 get? We will be covering basic employment law matters, because of course these are young people and they may not know what their employment rights are. So we will be letting them know what their rights are. So that will refer to holiday, it will refer to sickness, it will refer to who to go to if they have any concerns or issues, how to raise a grievance. Of course, rest breaks, all of those things that, a young worker may not necessarily know. Of course, we will give them some help and guidance in making sure that they know what is expected of them in terms of their attendance and timekeeping, working together as a team and communication. Some of them will be the first time that they will be travelling into work on their own. So again, we'll be giving them some top safety tips on travelling to work. We will be covering things like basic work ethics, understanding social media protocol, because of course social media is the downfall of so many people, not just the young. It is of all ages, but we want to make sure that a young worker doesn't fall into the social media trap. Of course, we will be covering aspects of bullying and harassment in the workplace, equality and diversity, mental health awareness, and of course GDPR essentials. We will also be covering topics under health and safety. So we will be having an introduction to health and safety in the workplace. If they are at a desk, we will be doing a BSc assessment. We will be covering things like fire awareness and essential health and safety training, which will be delivered. And of course, the final piece, which I'm really excited about, is preparing the candidate for life outside of your placement. So we'll be putting on workshops where we'll be doing CV writing and how to apply for jobs. We will be actually pointing the candidates as to where to actually look for those jobs, how they can write their LinkedIn profile, because of course many businesses now use LinkedIn to attract those candidates. So how can they have their LinkedIn profile look attractive to businesses? We will be going through interview techniques, and of course we'll be putting on a fun mock interview process, and of course we won't be having any of those situations where we say you're fired. We will be definitely going through the stages where we will be pointing to them and be saying you're hired. So that's it from me in terms of what we have gone through. So let's have a quick look at those questions. So do bear with me. I think there are quite a few and they have disappeared behind my little bar. So if you bear with me. Gosh, there are loads and I can't see any of them. So I'm going to have to apologize profusely to everybody who's put those questions in there and have been waiting patiently until the end of there. So I do apologize. What we will do is, I promise we will have a look at those this afternoon, and we will get that Q&A out to you before we get the recording out to you. I can't apologize enough. I did see them appear, but for some reason, let me just try something. Let me try something. Oh, no. So apologies. I've now made things even worse still. I'm actually deleting things. I'm not going to fiddle. What we will do is, it's okay. My colleague Anne Baxter, who sets this all up, is saying that she's quite happy to put the questions over to me. So I don't know if you can see a poll. If there is a poll where you think that is a good idea, if you just type in the questions box yes if you want Anne to read those questions out to me, or no if you want the Q&A to come out this afternoon. We'll do a quick poll and see what the response is like. I do apologize about this, and I have to take full responsibility for this. This is no. Oh, right, we've had a no. Okay, no questions this afternoon, but what we will do is I will get those Q&As out to you. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed today's session. Do remember that HR for UK are here to help you and support you. Anything that you think that you can need help with, it doesn't have to be COVID related, it could be anything. We are here to help and support you, and we promise that you will get the support and guidance that you need. We do have different crisis packages available. You can come onto our subscribed version if you are not a client. Of course, if you are a client and you want us to do some bespoke work for you, we will be there and we will help you. So just a quick reminder, we will have our next Friday afternoon webinar on Friday, the 18th of December. And I'm actually going to be putting together a package for you of what to do if your business has to close because of a COVID-19 infection in your workplace. I've had to support a couple of businesses over the last couple of weeks on what they had to do when there was more than 2 infections within the workplace. And I think it'll be really, really useful to have an action plan in place in the event that you are unfortunate in a situation where you need to close your business. This is separate and different to if you have to close your business because of you going into the tier system. So the next webinar, I've had a quick poll put in, so that is something new for me and it's thrown me. But of course, we also have our quick snapshot HR surgery, which is on a Wednesday, and the next surgery is on Wednesday, and I'm looking to Ange to see if she's got a date for me.
It's the 2nd of December.
Which will be Wednesday, the 2nd of December. Do remember that is only for a half-an-hour session. It's no waffle from me. It is purely answering all those important questions from you. So lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. Just a quick reminder on where you can get help and support. Our telephone number is 01455 442. Our info our email address is info@hrforuk.com, and of course our website is www.hrforuk.com, and you can complete the contact us form. As always, we are here for you. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Have an amazing Friday evening and have a brilliant weekend, and take care. Bye for now.